Yep, and so we are recording. Welcome, everyone. We have a few people coming in. Hello, Lindsay. I'm going to share us to Facebook. So let's see here. Share on my own timeline. No, share to your page. Okay, great. So we're about to be on live. It's still loading. Yay. So we're on. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Just setting up my space here. And let's see who we have. We got quite a few people. So welcome, Andrea, Benjamin, Devin, Nyla. Hey, Shania, Sharon. Uh-oh, I got my my feedback here. We'll also be taking comments from Facebook. So please send your questions on Facebook. If you know anyone who you think needs to hear this information, everyone needs to hear this information. So just go ahead and tell them to jump on Facebook and join us. You can put any comments, greetings in the chat. And I have a lovely flyer here with Ms. Charnell. So I'm gonna share that with you guys. Hey, Andrea. We have our executive director on. And I don't want to take up a whole bunch of time, but I want to give people a couple minutes to filter in. And then I'm also tell the people from Facebook that they can post their questions. So I'll do that real quick. So hopefully everyone had a great day, Tuesday. More than half of the week already gone? No, we're almost to hump day, not yet though. All right, and I think we'll just go ahead and get started. So that way we'll stay on time and we can make sure that everyone gets to hear this great information. So just a few housekeeping for those that are in the Zoom. We're muted right now, except for the panelists. You can submit your questions in the question answer, or that's on top of the your Zoom screen, or you can put it in your chat. And for us today, we are doing our Mind Health Shop Talk, partnering with House of Ruth. Our presenters today will be talking about IPV 101. And I thought it was a great topic for our series because we haven't really done this. I don't think we've done intimate partner violence before, but I really love this quote. We had shared this, Andrea had shared this a little bit ago in one of her presentations. And I think this is a great intro to this topic, to make sure you take a day to heal from the lies that you've told yourself and ones that have been told to you, by Maya Angelou. And I just think that's a good quote for us to start with. So for our Mind Health Shop Talk, we want to make sure that we're giving resources into the community. This is a partnership with Kaiser Permanente's Good Health, Great Hair, Barbershop and Beauty Salon Network Outreach Initiatives. And through the beauty salons and barbershops, they've been able to educate their barbers and beauticians on how to provide mental health first aid, resources for getting jobs, for getting those initial health resources. And our arm of that is the Mind Health Shop Talks, which talk about mental health topics in those safe spaces. And for our Mind Health Shop Talk, we have been virtual throughout the COVID pandemic. But in the fall, we plan to be back in the barber shops and beauty salons, and we're really excited about that. And so with this, I want to introduce you to our executive director, Andrea Brown. She's going to talk about our Black mental health. I was trying to get my PowerPoint wasn't caught up. She's going to talk about our wonderful organization and a few of the initiatives that we have going on right now. Hello, Ms. Brown.
Hello, thank you so much. When I saw the first picture after you introduced me, I thought, wow,
that's not me.
Yeah. And so I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you, Roxana. Thank you for so much. What some of you don't know is Roxana really does labor over topics and what is relevant and what makes sense as we help a community of Black and Brown people heal and what that looks like. And so I saw somebody put in the chat earlier, thank you for hosting this timely conversation. Just know that a great thought goes into what we bring you and what we bring ourselves. And so again, thank you so much. I'm Andrea Brown, the executive director, and I promise I'm not going to take up much time, but this has been an exciting partnership with Kaiser Permanente. And what makes it, it has given us an opportunity to expand our reach. It has also given us an opportunity to really not just expand our reach virtually, but to expand our reach throughout the community. And so this is an exciting moment for us to bring this topic for Black and Brown people to understand what's at stake when we don't heal and when we don't take our healing seriously. And so for almost 40 years, the Black Mental Health Alliance really has been at the root of how do we help oh, I love it. Our mission is up to develop, promote, and sponsor trusted, culturally affirming educational forums, trainings, and referral services that support the health and well-being of Black people and their communities. And that always looks different, right? So it's not just what you think of, maybe a symposium. It's not just, it's not just a panel, but it is offerings and trainings like these and opportunities like these that we get to really get a pulse on what's happening in the Black community. And so again, we are excited about our partnership with Kaiser, but more importantly, we're excited about this moment and this topic because we are starting to see intimate partner violence on the rise. We know that that we've seen some reportings of on the increase during COVID when people have not been able to. And the other thing is sometimes people just don't know what to do and what to say. So super excited about this. And I think that I will end here and I will say that we've had this conversation with a number of people. And one of the things that we talk about is that your silence won't protect you. And so we are hoping today that through the population that we serve, that people will understand that our silence won't protect us. And we've got some new cue cards. And so I feel remiss if I don't say that we're an advocacy and membership organization. You'll have an opportunity to join us. This work doesn't stop. We are still in the midst of, some people are in recovery, but sometimes for Black and Brown communities, that is we're still a step behind. So again, there's information about us on the screen. Won't you volunteer? Won't you become a member? And won't you join us in this work? So thank you again. Thank you, Roxana, for your commitment and diligence and your timely offerings as you go through this, with Mind Health Shop Talk. So thank you so much and enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you. So you know what, before we start, we're going to actually have two speakers tonight. We'll have Charnell Covert and we'll have Miss Lady T with us tonight. I don't have Miss Lady T's picture, but I have her nice video. She's going to be in live, so we're good. But I'm going to introduce them both. She will start off sharing her powerful testimony, her lived experience, and hopefully inspire us even more about why this topic is so timely. So I'll just start with introducing Miss Lady T. And so Miss Lady T is a Baltimore native who has turned her pain into purpose. She has gone from being a stay-at-home mom to a data entry clerk and to becoming one of the top account managers at a national recognized company, and is now a successful realtor who is continuously growing her business. Lady T is very passionate about her community. She promotes health and family because she believes that healthy families equals healthier communities. Isn't that the truth? And so timely for Black Mental Health Alliance right now. She volunteers with Baltimore Ceasefire as an ambassador. She has also worked with other nonprofit organizations such as the House of Ruth as a storyteller, which she's doing tonight, and the Baltimore County Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team, whose mission is to provide recommendations to prevent deaths related to domestic violence and Gather Together, which is a collective of survivors whose advocacy and empower other survivors. Lady T believes that we all have the power to create and also to be the change we need. So we appreciate you being here tonight. Do you want us to start with you, or do you want me to introduce you as well, Professor?
We can go ahead and start with Lady T.
Okay, so I'm going to turn the baton over to you, Ms. Lady T.
Okay, thanks. I really appreciate being able to share my story today with everyone. Even before I even start out with sharing my story, I just always like to have a disclaimer that my story may be triggering for some folks. And so I always advise to practice self-care. Don't forget to love on yourself after our conversation here today. So I'm going to go right ahead and start sharing my story.
So yes,
yeah, you're
so
welcome.
if you feel triggered, please, we have a resource and referral specialist that I can share her contact in the chat. So that way you'll have some kind of resource and support as well.
No, you're welcome. I never would have thought I would have been spending my New Year's Eve in 2009 as a victim of rape, but unfortunately for myself, that's exactly what happened. And it was actually at the hands of my very own husband. My freshman year in college, I met the most amazing guy. He was my Mr. Wonderful. He had a full-time job, and he also was a full-time student as well. He used to shower me with beautiful gifts, take me to fancy restaurants. This is the type of person that you would actually want to bring home and introduce to your family. So things started to actually change within what I would say our perfect relationship. And it was not until after I was expecting our first child. We started to have frequent arguments, or what I would call minor disagreements. And I can recall after one of our disagreements, I wanted to just try to smooth things over because I just thought it was nerves of being a first-time parent. I know I was nervous about it, so I thought he was probably feeling the same way. So I wanted to surprise him, just letting him know how much I love him and appreciated him. So I wanted to surprise him with a card, like I said, just to let him know, hey, I love you. And I was in for an even bigger surprise because once I was leaving his house, I was greeted by his ex-girlfriend, and we did not fight or anything like that. Some people probably think, oh, it's about to go down. No, it didn't go down. We just had a conversation. We decided to actually confront him together. And we knocked on the door, and once he answered and he saw the both of us there, that's when he kind of lost control and he had actually begun to attack her. Now, this was my first time ever seeing him as a violent guy. I never saw a temper before then. And needless to say, after that moment, we had broken up, and I was actually like 6 months pregnant. But once I had our son, he wanted to try to reconcile our relationship. So I actually gave into it. And one of the reasons was because he promised me what happened with her would never happen with me, because what we had was something much more different, something much more special. And I really wanted to believe that. And for myself, I really didn't want to raise my son by myself or whatever. I thought it was very important to have a 2-parent household to raise a child. I thought that was the number one goal for myself or whatever. So we actually ended up getting married, and we moved to Virginia. But before that, he joined the military to become a better man for us, and then that's when he kind of moved to Virginia. And once we made the move, that's when things really start to, I'll say, start to really, I was able to really better identify what type of relationship I was in, I'll say that. We would have arguments that would last to the wee hours in the morning. Needless to say, I was emotionally drained of the relationship because of like the arguments and stuff like that. He would shake me violently. He would punch holes in the wall. He would threaten to kill himself if I would decide to leave him. So it was somewhat difficult for me to identify that I was in an abusive relationship, but like as time went on, I definitely knew kind of what it was. I can recall after one of our I would call crazy nights, I had received a phone call once he had left for work. And on the other end, it was I guess it was someone from the military who actually just called me. Where we lived at was like a military community, but the community, it was kind of off base, but just about everyone there was a part of the military. So my neighbor, her husband was a part of the military. So I believe she was the one who made the phone call to let them know what she was hearing, and how she just wanted me to get help. So like I said, once he was leaving for work, I was notified by someone in the military, and the person on the other end of the phone was asking me, are you in an abusive relationship? Are you being abused? And I hesitated, and I remember just saying, no, I wasn't. And I'm pretty sure they can tell because I didn't even have a voice on me at the time. My voice was nothing but a whisper, basically, because of, like I said, because of the crazy night that him and I had. But I said no because I was terrified of what would happen if he found out that I was talking to someone about what was going on in our house. And I was also terrified what happened if he would lose his job, because at that time I was a stay-at-home mom, and we had 2 kids at that particular time, whatnot. So for those reasons, I said no. I wasn't in an abusive relationship, but those people did leave me with some tools, some resources, just in case if you are being abused. They wanted to leave me with some resources. I did take notes, mental note, I'll say. I didn't write anything down, but I did take mental note of their suggestions and stuff like that. But what I didn't know, as I was being confronted at home with that phone call, he was being confronted once he went into work by his commanding officer. And he was actually ordered to do mandatory counseling. And so once he did counseling, I actually thought things had kind of changed in our relationship, because we didn't have any more arguments and stuff like that. It actually, probably like 2 to 3 years, we didn't have any issues. So I actually thought it was fixing. I was really excited by that time. And now it's like 3 years after that, it's 3 kids now. And lo and behold, I found out that he was cheating. And once I found that out, I kind of had already made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to put up with any more cheating and no more physical abuse from him. So because of that promise to myself, once I found out that he was cheating, I said, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I packed up and I left. And I found my way back here to Maryland, and it was extremely difficult for me to try to provide the same quality lifestyle that my kids was accustomed to at this time. Because I'm transitioning from being a stay-at-home mom to trying to start working. I was able to find housing and stuff like that, but it wasn't in the best neighborhood at all. And so he wanted to try to reconcile again. And, you know, I was really trying not to, but it was, like I said, it was because of the financial hardships and stuff like that. I kind of was like, okay, for the sake of my kids, I was thinking I can do this thing. I can stay in this relationship, even though I know it's like a toxic relationship, it's an unhealthy relationship. I actually felt like I was sacrificing myself for the sake of for the sake of my children, for the betterment of my children. I thought I was doing them a favor, basically, by staying in that relationship. But I really did try my best. And when New Year's Eve happened, I guess I'll say that, we was actually planning on moving, I was actually planning on moving back to Virginia or whatever, to be with him and, you know, to bring my kids, you know, bring their family back together. And before I can even get back to Virginia, New Year's Eve happened. Was he received a phone call, and it was another person, a young lady on the other end. And I overheard him. Well, I found out that he was actually supposed to be, or he had plans to be with her on New Year's Eve as well. And I just told him, like, you know what, I couldn't do it. I'm like, I just can't do it. I was like, you know what, you can go. It's over. I'm done. This is it. And that's when he flipped out. And that's when I'll say the unthinkable happened to me. And it wasn't like for pleasure. And I think it was just to show power and to dominate me, right? Excuse me. So when my kid was actually present when it had taken place. And what I would do is normally try to go to a different room when we would get into arguments or something like that. So we were in a different part of the house, but they were still there and they heard exactly what was going on. And I always remember my son knocking on the door and asking if we can just love each other. And I just remember, like, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking that's all I was trying to do is to give you guys that, but I, you know, unsuccessfully, I was unable to do that. And I always say, like, a part of me kind of like died that day, right? And I would never be able to get that person back, but an even stronger person survived that day. And I am a survivor, and that's I'm a strong woman. You know, I survived that moment. And so it was extremely hard for me to deal with that. And then that strong person even took additional steps by even going into, you know, pressing charges. You know, I had to stop thinking about what can happen with him and start thinking about, you know, he should have thought about that. So I actually decided to press charges, and I, you know, went through the court system looking for justice and stuff like that. Really didn't find the justice that I thought I deserved. And what happened was that the state's attorney did decide to take my case. But because it was kind of my word against his word, things didn't pan out for me. But I choose to seek justice in other ways or whatever. At first, I thought that was the end of my story. I thought that was the end of, you know, I thought my life probably didn't matter at that particular moment. That's what I was thinking. But I decided to start sharing my story actually is powering for me. It's therapeutic for me as well to be able to share my story, to help other women, others, not just women, but other survivors, I'll say, to overcome domestic violence and sexual assault and stuff like that. And my spiritual background kind of really helped me as far as healing. And I used to think that, you know, I thought I had came to a place where I just arrived, you know, and I realized that for me, I realized that that will never really happen when you just come to a place where you just like, hey, it's an ongoing thing. You always have to practice healing and self-care. These are things is just like almost like a part of life. And for me, that's what I do to heal. And I give back to my community. And yeah, so yeah, and like I said, anything I do, being able to share my story, like with, because I have issues like with the justice system, I had not have issues, but because of the trouble, or because I didn't have the justice that I wanted. Now that I'm a storyteller, I'm able to share my story with judges and let them know how, the perspective of a survivor, so they can have more compassion when dealing with a survivor. So like I said, I probably didn't win in the way that I had hope at that particular time, but I won in other ways. And I want to say thank you for just hearing my story. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing your truth and all that you've been through. And I know you even went through more than what you shared with us. So I appreciate you coming and sharing in such an honest way. And also in the chat, we have a few people. I don't know if you can see this, Miss Lady T. Thank you for being vulnerable and honest. Your voice and life matters. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lady T.
Yeah, so, oh my, I'm getting teary. Thank you for sharing. Takes courage to share our dark truths. Yes, yes. And I think so many people are going to be looking through the lens of the story that you told. And I'm glad that you're able to share with judges as well, because I think that helps judges when they're making their rulings as well. So with that, I wanted to transition for our second part of this presentation with Professor Charnell Covert. She's gonna go over with us a few things, but I want to tell you about all the amazing things this powerful goddess, as she told me is one of her pronouns, is doing right now, and I don't want to miss anything. So I'm gonna pull it up real quick. So for our guest speaker today, Ms. Charnell Covert is an educator, an activist, a community organizer, a minister, and a healer. And we love our mental health providers that are healers in the Black community, especially here at Black Mental Health Alliance. She currently works as a community educator for the House of Ruth of Maryland, one of the leading organizations against intimate partner violence in families and communities. She's a seasoned educator, and she's currently in the Women and Gender Studies department at Towson State University, where she uses liberation and creative pedagogy that challenges her students to become servant leaders in their own spheres of influence. Love it. Thank you so much for connecting with me. So one of the ways that this presentation came about is because someone was really proactive at making sure they connected with me. And I'm telling you, as soon as we connected, it was like we just had a vibe going on, I feel like. And I was like, no, we have to do this.
Yes.
And I even, when she told me, oh, we have a storyteller, well, they need to come too. So I'm just so glad that both of you were able to join tonight. And really change people's lives with the work you're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Roxana. Greetings to everyone who is on the Zoom. Thank you for coming out on a Tuesday evening. I first want to say, take a moment. In Kiswahili, the term that we use is Asante Sana, and I have to say Asante Sana to my very dear sister, my comrade, my colleague, and my friend. Lady T, you were fantastic, phenomenal, amazing, incredible, and gave us so much to chew on. Thank you for your experience of strength and hope. Thank you for encouraging, and thank you for your healing, and thank you for sharing your healing journey with us. Thank you for being all that you are in the Baltimore community, and to your family and to your friends. Truly, we are better because of your presence. And I want to say thank you personally for once again blessing us with your beautiful story. I also shared in the chat that Lady T is one of we are very proud of Lady T. Amongst many other things that she does in and around the community, she is a House of Ruth, Maryland storyteller. And if you're interested in booking Lady T for future engagements or other storytellers, we have other phenomenal storytellers as well. Or if you are a victim survivor who has experienced intimate partner violence and have done some healing work yourself and are ready to begin to share your story publicly, we encourage you to become a storyteller. And I shared that link for our website, hruthmd.org/training institute and storytellers. And you can actually find more information about Lady T, our other storytellers, and if you are interested in becoming a storyteller yourself. So once again, thank you, Lady T. And thank you so much for the Black Mental Health Alliance. This is such a again, timely conversation. Miss Andrea Brown, it's a pleasure to meet you virtually. I do look forward to working with you and your organization continuously. I'm so grateful for this beautiful partnership with Kaiser. And of course, thank you to House of Ruth Maryland for having me here today. I want to share with you all some interesting points about Intimate Partner Violence 101. And so we're going to go through a journey to everything that you heard that Lady T shared from a very interpersonal perspective. I'm going to give you some key impacts of who intimate partner violence impacts, what it is, what the different types of abuse are. And we're just going to go through some of this information that you need to know, also how to support victim survivors of intimate partner violence, and a lens that we can use when we're thinking about BIPOC survivors, which stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So we're looking at how can we use an intersectional framework to support Black victim survivors. And I'll talk about the language piece, which is very important. I want to state this because I see the beautiful African symbols on the Black and the hashtag Black Minds Matter, which they do. And one of the things that we need to keep in mind when working with diverse populations, particularly Black, Indigenous, and people of color populations or folks of African descent, is that we come from so many different backgrounds. There's more than one way to be Black, a person of color, etc. And therefore, there's more than one way to experience any number of things. So please feel free to, I know Roxana is going to be helping me to monitor the chat. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat and I will definitely engage with them. I'm going to leave some time for questions in this time period, and we're just going to learn together. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you all. And thank you, Roxana, for that beautiful introduction. I appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint here for y'all. Okay, and so let me know, are you all able to see the screen in a large format, or are you able to see the presenter screen? Because I have two screens, so I just want to make sure we're in the right place.
So we see the two screens. Can you click the three dots so it's in presentation mode? Or do you want both of the slides up?
What I can do, let me pause my share. What I can do is I can share the right screens. I think I shared screen.
Okay, no problem.
I think I shared screen one and not screen two. So wait a second.
Yes, there you go.
There we go. Okay, perfect. So let's go back. So today we're talking about Intimate Partner Violence 101. Thank you again for being here. Happy Sexual Assault Awareness Month. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and this is the color of the ribbon for this month. You see me wearing I didn't have that exact shade of bluish green, but I tried to get close with my yellow and my green today. Today is this month throughout, we are celebrating victim survivors of sexual assault. We're bringing awareness to the issue. We unfortunately live in a rape culture, family. And what that means is that rape shows up as a part of our language. as a part of our daily culture. It's seen as accessible and permissible in many different spaces, and we have to actively work to upend it. There is an inextricable link. I'll be talking about intersectionality a little bit during this conversation and this presentation, but there is an inextricable link between intimate partner violence and sexual assault. We work very closely. One of our beautiful partners in community is Turnaround, that does fantastic work in the Baltimore City and Baltimore County areas regarding sexual assault. And so this, we see this all the time at intimate partner violence a lot, at House of Ruth, excuse me. A lot of our intimate partner violence victim survivors are also victim survivors of sexual assault. So we encourage you to think of these as both and conversations as we're in this month of April to reflect on what sexual assault is and how we can really upend, dismantle, and eventually erase rape culture. That starts with the jokes that we hear that are improper, the sort of locker room banter that happens, right, amongst young people. All of these steps towards any rape culture to the policy level, when it comes to the policies that we pass, things such as VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act, and other sexual assault laws. All of these things are interconnected both at the state, local, and national level. So I just wanted to take a moment to just honor, and I also wanted to take a moment of silence for any of the sexual assault victim survivors or intimate partner violence folks who were not survivors and were victims and who lost their lives as a result of sexual assault or intimate partner violence. So let's just take a moment. Thank you for taking that moment with me. To their lives and their legacies, we say Ashe, and we thank them for all that they have offered in this space called Earth. So let's talk a little bit about some safe space rules that we are in Zoom. I know it is a little different. This series is all about community and engagement. And typically we would be in a barbershop or a hair salon, which I would love because, you know, get my hair twisted all up and making us feel good. When we look good, we feel good. That is a part of our self-care and mental health wellness. But some of the things that I want you all to keep in mind when thinking about this space is that I would like for you to remain muted unless you're sharing with the group, and feel free to share in the chat. Please take care of yourself. Make sure that you're drinking, eating, deep breathing. This is a sensitive topic and it can be triggering. So I want you to be well. Do what you need to do for yourself. Some of you on this line might be victim survivors. Some of you at some points might have been abusers. And so you might be feeling some personal resonance with this information. Please do take care of yourself. Additionally, share this information with a friend. The one caveat that I will say is that if someone shares personal information within this Zoom and this Facebook Live about their experiences, we use the Vegas rule, which is what is said here stays here. However, all of the information that I'm sharing with you in terms of statistics, anecdotal information, information that you can use in your everyday work or when working with victim survivors, feel free to share that broadly. There is an interactive tool that I'm using called Slido, and I'll explain that in a minute, so please do participate in the Slido. Please post any questions or comments in the chat or ask at the end, and always share respectfully and kindly. And also, as stated, please share this information in your respective communities. So Roxana gave an amazing overview. Thank you. I'm so, as many women and particularly Black women and queer people get very nervous about talking about ourselves, and I'm trying to work on it. So I just had this little overview. I'm very honored to be a member of the House of Ruth Maryland team and family as the community educator in the training institute. And so I get to do this all day and all the time. I get to speak to amazing individuals like yourself about intimate partner violence. If you're hearing this training and this workshop and you're really enjoying it, please reach out to me. My information will be at the end of the slides, and I can help to set up a training for your organization, your place of business, your place of worship, your sorority, your fraternity, whatever organization you're engaged with. As stated, I'm also a professor at Towson University in Women and Gender Studies. Hello to all the young people on the line. Congratulations to you. We need to celebrate our young people, particularly our young people of color who have been traversing through this pandemic in their college years and high school years and middle school years. What a time to be a student. And so I am grateful and very proud of all of you. Congratulations to our COVID graduates and those who are still in school. We appreciate you. And so thank you for being here today. Also an advocate, activist, spiritual leader. I love many things, but I thought I'll list a few, which are sunflowers, chocolate, and justice. My pronouns are shared here, and I am very excited to be able to share this conversation with you. So let's get into it. Here is our Slido. So if you take your phone, we love technology when technology works for us. So I have a QR code on the screen. You can take a picture of this QR code, and you can, it will lead you to a set of questions that we'll be using. So what you'll see is on the screen, we'll be able to see people's conversations and responses to the question, and you'll be able to post anonymously. So it gives us an opportunity within the Zoom space to still feel like we have that, community engagement piece. If you are having trouble with the QR code and taking a picture of the QR code, I encourage you to go to slido.com and you can put in the hashtag Mind Health Shop Talk. So I'll give you all a minute with that. Beautiful, beautiful. And so while we're, I forgot to state this, if we could get, I wonder who's in the room. If you're on the Facebook, Roxanne, I know you're checking, all my Facebook Live folks, just let us know who's here from Baltimore, who's here from other states, what organization you're coming from, maybe what your role is, what you're hoping to get out of this evening, what you've already gotten, because we've already been fed so well with the amazing story by Lady T. Okay. And so you will have another opportunity if you didn't quite catch the QR code or the slido.com hashtag Mind Health Shop Talk. It will be up in a couple of slides. So here's our agenda. First, we're going to define intimate partner violence, and then we're going to talk about the different forms of abuse. We're going to talk about why victim survivors stay. And this is a very important topic because oftentimes there is such stigma for victim survivors on multiple levels, including, if it were me, girl, I would have just left. If it were me, I would have killed him, her, them, right? We have so much stigma and so much judgment around victim survivors' choices to stay. But as we'll learn, there are complex reasons why victim survivors might stay in an abusive relationship. And then we're going to talk about how to support victim survivors of intimate partner violence. And I'm not going to leave you without resources. I'm going to give you some resources through House of Ruth, also throughout the state of Maryland, and some particular resources for Black victim survivors as well. So our first Slido question is, and you can go ahead and type this in, and you see that the QR code is to the left as well as the slido.com and the hashtag. How would you define intimate partner violence? So sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but I'm just giving you, and also Roxanne, I don't know if we have anyone tuning in from Facebook that might be typing this in the chat, but we can share those.
Yes, so we have one person from Facebook, Dr. Ronnie, from ATL. We have people from California. So we've got a lot of different people on the line.
What's going on, ATL? Hey, Callie. And did we have anyone who shared their either in the Slido or in the chat? Did we have anyone who shared their definitions? Oh, we see some stuff coming up on the screen here. Someone stated that it is control, yes, and painful. So when it gets bigger, that means multiple people have stated the same thing. So number of you have stated that intimate partner violence is about control, definitely. Power over someone else, absolutely. Any emotional abuse, it is very complex, absolutely. Power over someone else, yep. Getting physical abuse, absolutely. So you all have touched on some key components of intimate partner violence. Let's get a working definition that we can use so that we have a good framework of what it actually is.
Do you want me to drop the people's responses in the chat into, oh, you moved it. Never mind.
Oh no, please. I'm sorry. Yes, please drop them into the chat.
Okay, I'm gonna drop it in there.
Yeah, I'm seeing, I was trying to check the chat and I see some folks wrote manipulation, fear, incest, rape, survivor. Oh, okay. Hello, Alvita. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We have some folks from San Diego, Atlanta, Philly, Massachusetts, Jacksonville, Pastor, wonderful. Baltimore, awesome, awesome, awesome. Imperialism and colonialism abuse. Come on now, Vita, talk about it. I do one of my favorite trainings on that I've done through House of Ruth and in conjunction with the Women and Gender Studies Department was this past February, and I called it Black and Blue: Understanding Intimate Partner Violence in Black Communities. And in that training today, I wanted to sort of give us a broad overview and give some focus on Black communities, as we are Black Mental Health Alliance. And this event is all about working within those communities. But yet I also wanted to give us a broad scope in case people are coming from different backgrounds. But in that Black and Blue training, Alvita, I definitely talk about those particular types of abuse from imperialism and colonialism and structural and systemic racism, which are huge factors that we have to take into consideration when we're dealing with victim survivors of intimate partner violence. So yeah, these are great connections to the work that we need to do. So here is a baseline definition of intimate partner violence. Notice that the words pattern and power are highlighted and bolded in green. The reason for that is because one cannot have intimate partner violence without a pattern of coercively controlling behaviors used by a current or previous partner in order to gain and maintain power and control over that other partner. So both pattern and power are intrinsic to the definition, right? Things that happen repeatedly, and it's all about one partner having power over the other partner. Now, you might have heard things like domestic violence used before, but at House of Ruth and with many of the current intimate partner violence movements, there's a reason why we use intimate partner violence instead of domestic violence. So just to give a little bit, to put my, as I said, sort of figuratively, I wear a lot of hats, and literally, I do love headwear. But to put my professor hat on for a moment and give a little bit of a history and a herstory of terminology and language. Language definitely matters, y'all. When we're thinking about tools of oppression, right? Language has often been used in colonial spaces and imperialistic spaces to gain control over BIPOC folks, people of color, folks from low-income backgrounds, etc., historically and historically. And so the words that we choose to use have power and have great definition and connection to those systems. Domestic violence comes out of the second wave feminist movement, which gave us the battered women's movement in the early 1970s. And this movement was the second wave feminist movement, if you know anything about the history of women and gender studies, was a movement that was primarily supporting the desires of white middle-class women, and that they had a need to want to work outside of the home. So historically, white women from more affluent backgrounds were working domestically inside of the home as stay-at-home moms. And so there was a shift vis-a-vis World War II when many of white men and other men of color as well, but we're just talking about this group, will go off to war, and then women were then needed to be in factory jobs, etc. And so what happened is when they came back, right, when the soldiers came back, white women who were previously in the home doing domestic work found themselves being pushed out of jobs they really cared about thus the call for equity within workplace. And so being able to maintain their jobs. Now, the reason why I make that distinction between a white middle class movement and what we see as womanism and later feminist movements such as third world feminism, global feminism, Black feminism, hood feminism, crunk feminism, etc., is because Black women and brown women have historically always worked outside of the home, whether that was being a wet nurse during slavery, working in the fields, etc., during sharecropping work at post-slavery and in Reconstruction. So there was never the same sort of attention to the workplace, was not as high of a priority for many Black women who were already workers. But this idea of the battered women's movement came out of the second wave feminist movement, because what was happening is we saw a lot of second wave feminists saying, you know what, it's not okay. And this was still using a very heteronormative lens. It's not okay that a wife and her husband, if the wife is being beaten by the husband, it's kept as a private issue between the wife and the husband. So the general sentiment in the 1970s and previous to that time in this country, and even globally, I would argue, but we're particularly focusing on the US, was that whatever happens between the husband and wife is between those two. It's private, right? Don't air your dirty laundry. We don't talk about it, etc. And these things cross borders when it comes to culture as well, and different groups based off of race and ethnicity. And so what the battered women's movement did was said, no, this is a public issue. This is a policy issue. This is a public health issue. The private is public and the private is political, was the sort of mantra that came out of the second wave feminist movement and the battered women's movement. And this is where we begin to see early development of shelters, specifically for women who were being battered by abusive partners, generally speaking as men, but it was open for any woman who was being battered by her partner. And the term domestic really wanted to show that we want to take what's happening in the house and make it a public concern. The problem with domestic violence and still using that term is that it displaces large groups of people who might be experiencing violence from a partner. Take, for example, what if someone does not have a home in the typical way that we think? They are essentially homeless or displaced, but they are experiencing violence from their partner. Domestic connotes that the violence has to take place inside of a home. And we know for a fact that there are various groups of individuals and families and communities who are impacted by intimate partner violence, whose violence might not be taking place inside the home. Why? Because partners may or may not live together. Partners may or may not have a physical home, right? Partners may or may not have a understanding of shared space that allows them to be domestic partners. So we don't want to exclude large groups of people. Thus, we go to the term intimate partner, because that could talk to any number of situations. An intimate partner could be someone who is engaged, married, boyfriend, girlfriend, 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 boyfriend, boyfriend, partner, partner, right? It could be any number of configurations. It could be situationships with young people or older people who don't want to have a committed relationship, but have intimate dealings with each other. It could be continuous or repeated one-night stands. It could be friends with benefits. Anyone who has had intimate interactions with another person and has experienced violence, that would be why we use the term intimate partner violence. So I hope that makes sense, in that sort of real crash course on women and gender studies and the battered women's movement gave you context of why we got domestic violence and why that was very important. We needed that shift in our country, but why we've sort of progress to be able to be more inclusive to a variety of folks. And also it's important to note that, again, the domestic violence term and the battered women's movement initially just centered women. We also know that men experience intimate partner violence. We know that non-binary folks and gender fluid folks experience intimate partner violence. And so this more inclusive term of intimate partner violence is not gendered, it's not racialized, but instead speaks to a broader scope of folks who are experiencing this trauma. Partner abuse is another term that you might have heard used, but it really doesn't speak to that pattern of power and control. And then family violence is very important, but is not the same as intimate partner violence, because family violence talks about the type of violence that might be inflicted from mom to children, or from dad to children, from grandma to children, etc. It doesn't really talk about the connection of intimacy between partners. And I just want to check the chat to see if we have any questions. So I think it's pronounced Ganin says, has the change in language impacted or influenced legislation around protecting individuals who are victim survivors? Yes and no, Janine. I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Yes, I think there has been more recognition as of the last 20 years within the intimate partner violence sphere as it relates to public policy from legislators that we need to legislate for all individuals who are experiencing intimate partner violence. So in many ways that shift has helped. I think there is a larger conversation that includes not just one group of women, but women of different backgrounds, not just women, but also men, not just men, but also non-binary folks. And so there have been some shifts because of language. I've noticed that there have been, at least in service providers, just to be able to particularly serve the LGBTQIA plus community, language has been extremely important because when we don't use the right language, it excludes individuals from receiving services. And so in that regard, services as well as the link, because services are often used to give the baseline for those early legislation movements. And so we've seen the services that have matched have also given rise to the conversation around legislation that needs to be more inclusive. And I do think that a lot of that had to do with the shift in language, but also the shift in centering different experiences of different people from different backgrounds, and not just going to one particular affluent group that has a lot of social privilege and has a lot of access in our society and our culture. I hope that answered your question. You can let me know in the chat. All right. So let's talk a little bit about power and control and how it sort of expands the definition of intimate partner violence. This is the power and control wheel, which comes out of Duluth, Minnesota, again, in that early battered women's movement. And this power and control wheel gets used over and over again because on the outer rung, you see the different types of violence that might often be used, such as physical and sexual violence. And then on the inside, we see the tactics that abusive partners might use on an abused partner. Often coercion, coercing a partner or threatening them will be used in order to maintain that power and control over the other partner. Intimidation is often used, right? Intimidating the partner into doing things that they don't want to do. We'll talk about emotional abuse and psychological abuse, but this idea of playing with someone's mental stability, which is huge as we're thinking about Black Mental Health Alliance, right? Making someone feel as if they are insane or quote unquote crazy, and using that as a power dynamic over the abused partner, isolating the partner. This is huge. We see this so often at House of Ruth, Maryland, through our hotline and our shelter services. Often abused partners are isolated from family and friends so that the abusive partner can be the sole source of energy and power with them, and that they have no one else to turn to, get support from, or even bounce ideas about what is happening to me. Is this normal? Is this okay? The only person that they are around is their abusive partner, and therefore they have no other context about what is taking place. And so we see isolation as a huge factor with abused partners. Minimizing, denying, and blaming is particularly important because often abusive partners will act as if the abuse was not that big of a deal. Oh, I didn't hit you that hard. You're being dramatic. Stop being a drama person. Denying that didn't happen. I didn't hit you. So taking the incident that actually did happen and stating as if it did not. Blaming the victim, survivor, or the abused partner for the abuse that happens to them. If you hadn't have worn that dress and gone out with your friends when I asked you not to, excuse me, when I asked you not to, then I would not have hit you and I would not have pushed you. So this is akin to another term that we use in this work, which is victim blaming, something that happens often with sexual assault victim survivors, as well as intimate partner victim survivors. This idea that, in fact, we're blaming the victim instead of putting the onus where it belongs and where it should be from the beginning, which is with the abusive partner. When there are children involved, often abusive partners will use the children as a pawn or a tool to maintain power and control over their abused partner. Things like, if you say anything about what's happening in our home, I will fight to get full custody of the children so you won't be able to see them again. If you talk about what's happening in terms of what I'm doing to you, I will exact that same behavior on our children, right? So children, unfortunately, become another level and another layer of victim survivors themselves who've experienced abuse. I'm really excited this year. We have an amazing, every year we have a spring luncheon at House of Ruth, Maryland. I encourage you all to go to hruth.org, our website. I believe there might still be a few tickets left. This year, we're going to have a survivor story of a mother and daughter are going to be sharing their story together. And sort of the daughter speaking as now a young woman, but speaking as someone who was a child when the abuse was happening and the impact that that had on her. Is so important for us to, while this isn't a presentation on childhood trauma and the intersectional traumas that children experience, I would be remiss to not mention that we have to center the experiences of our children who are experiencing vicarious trauma that they might not have directly experienced, but have seen mom or dad being abused, right? Have seen parents being abused, have seen adult being abused, or the direct trauma that they've experienced as a result of the intimate partner violence with child abuse. And we have to make sure that we offer resources to the children in the homes of abused partners as well. Economic abuse is huge. Whether or not we agree with it, or like to talk about it, we live in a completely capitalistic society. And in said society, money is a tool to use for your own freedom, liberation, and access. Without money, you're unable to do many things. And so often we see abused partners taking money as a tool over an abusive partner, using that to maintain abuse, keeping money from them, not letting them have their independence because they don't have any resources. And this becomes a huge issue. Now, male privilege is put here. I just want to give this caveat because I want us to think about this on a structural level. One thing that's very important to know, which I'll talk a little bit about in the next couple of slides after one slide about power and control a little bit more in depth, but we know that intimate partner violence impacts everyone, regardless of gender. We do, however, see a gender disparity with intimate partner violence, where there are greater numbers of male abusers than female abusers or non-binary abusers. And so this concept of male privilege on the power and control wheel is placed here because of its direct link to patriarchy and sexism. We also live in a society, in addition to a rape culture, we live in a patriarchal and a sexist society. And in that patriarchal society, men are born with, just because of the fact that they are born male, are given unearned social privileges to be able to navigate and obtain power at greater levels than folks who are born woman or are non-binary. This idea of male privilege as it relates to abuse, however, is very critical because what we see in a lot of male abusers is this idea of a lot of it that comes from religion, some of the Judeo-Christian principles, a lot of it that comes from our American culture that is extremely violent. This idea that I'm the head of the household, I get to do whatever I want, I'm the man of the house, right? And so it is my duty and sort of my responsibility and my right to be able to exact harm on my partner because I'm the man. And that comes from generations of creating these unequal balances between men, women, and non-binary folks. So really important to think about structural violence as it impacts interpersonal violence or intimate partner violence. And male privilege definitely falls, that zeitgeist of male privilege definitely falls into this space. I'm just checking the chat to see what are some of the strategies for sexual and emotional abuse for youth who are in various systems. There are many different strategies that happen for youth who are in various systems such as foster care. Unfortunately, We see a number of young people in foster care being sexually assaulted and abused. Oftentimes, when parents are unable to provide the care for children, they end up in these systems, which the systems themselves can be abusive, pushing the children through. Their emotional abuse is rampant. People falling into foster care homes that unfortunately might just be taking them for a paycheck and not for the care that they actually need. So now that I've experienced abuse in the initial home that I grew up in, and now that I'm out of that home, I'm experiencing another type of abuse because I have parents who've fostered me or adopted me who really don't care. So there's a variety of sexual assault and emotional abuse things that are happening to our young people in various systems. Another system that is very abusive to young people is the juvenile justice system, right? We see there's a great disparities amongst youth of color who are being given much higher sentences for much lower offenses compared to their white counterparts. And so we see things like, as that is changing with the legalization of marijuana in many states, but we do see things such as young people being stopped and frisked still in this time period for small amounts of weed that is just for their person, or for walking while Black, driving while Black, all these terms that we use to connect to systemic racism. The juvenile justice system in many ways, I would argue, is extremely abusive to most of our young people. The rehabilitation system is another system, right? Often we see white teens getting the help that they need when they're experiencing drug abuse. And quite frankly, and quite unfortunately, when it comes to Black, Indigenous, people of color youth, we see our youth going into juvenile justice systems, which then lead to recidivism in the larger prison industrial complex as adults. And so all these systems working together, juvenile justice, foster care, and in many ways, a highly ineffective public education system that is not sometimes catching the abuse that some of our young people are experiencing, kind of work in tandem to create unsafe environments for our young people. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I want to commend Black Mental Health Alliance for doing a lot of that work with young people, as well as any other organizations that are represented that are doing that. This is a really critical part of healing that we need to do in our communities. Thank you for that question.
And I think Alvita Sophia said parent raping. Is that raping?
I think that's what I was about to ask. I think they were saying, Alvita, were you saying parent raping, I believe, or parents? I think you're saying parents raping, like incest. I think is what you're referencing. Parents maybe raping children, which is a very tricky issue. And that would be, remember, I gave you those terms that would definitely fall under family violence if that was taking place. All right, so this is just to sort of wrap this up. I wanted to include this, and I'm going to take a little bit of time to just explicate what you're seeing in front of you. This is a larger power and control wheel that talks about cultural violence and institutional violence as the larger system. Think about intimate partner violence as a microcosm and reflection of our larger society. That means the larger system, the macro system, is the deeply violent and intrinsically violent part of our culture. We could not have intimate partner violence in the US without the deeply violent culture of the US. We permit intimate partner violence. We create an environment that makes it ripe to foster in our homes and communities as a result of the very violent culture we live in. Cultural violence comes up in many different ways, such as language that's used. So people making jokes about intimate partner violence and sexual assault. It comes up in lyrics of songs. I often reference this song, a very popular song by Jay-Z and Beyonce, Drunken Love. In Jay-Z's verse, he says, "I'm Ike Turner, eat the cake, anime, eat the cake," referencing Tina Turner's extensive abuse from her former husband, Ike Turner. Much of her abuse was happening in the public sphere, at least within the music industry, and people turned a blind eye to the deep, deep intimate partner violence that she was experiencing. So this casual reference to make a joke out of Tina Turner's very traumatic experience and to put that in a pop culture song to make it seem as if it is something that we can make light of instead of something that we need to be addressing and talking to young people about is, in my opinion, not just careless, but reckless, because it creates an environment that fosters even more of that same intimate partner violence. Traditions that we have, such as dances that are done, some of the dances that our young people might do, or even older people do, can be violent in their replications. Heroes and heroines, the art that is produced, fads, norms, rituals, values, etc. And then also when we think about institutions, right? Institutions uphold the culture. And so without culture is defined by the institutions that you have, that is a part of a large facet of that culture. So thinking about educational institutions, right? I work at the Training Institute at House of Ruth, Maryland, which is the educational leg of House of Ruth, Maryland. I also teach at Towson, and in those capacities, these are both educational institutions. I just recently did a lecture, guest lecture at a colleague's class at Towson State University. And I asked the students, what do prisons and universities have in common? And I'm asking you all the same question. You can put that in the chat if you have an answer. What is the commonality or the shared experience between prisons and universities? What do they have in common? And I'm checking in chat to see if anyone is chiming in. And Roxana, you can let me know if anyone is chiming in on Facebook. Shania said the money they gave, the money they make, excuse me. Roxana said sheep mentality, literature,
Yeah, I
all
didn't know what to put.
genres. Yeah, literature, all genres, and animal association as women is meat, and animal meat as is okay to eat or abuse it, diversity. These are all true. The thing that is universal across both a university and a prison is that they are both institutions. And when one has an institution, there's a process of institutionalization, right? And institutionalization means there are certain rhetoric and there's certain production that I'm trying to train you for. The question is, what am I institutionalizing you for? Our colleges are supposed to institutionalize our young people to become professionals and to become leaders. Our prison systems are designed to institutionalize our young people, in my opinion. It does not rehabilitate them, but instead makes them become recidivized or go through the same process all over again, right? When you come home and all of your rights are stripped, even after you've served your time, regardless of if you actually committed the crime, you are being sort of doubly accused for the same crime because you're unable to vote in some states, because you're unable to get public assistance, because you're unable to get a job being a felon, right? And so what options do you have but to go back into the very same field of the Black market or the Black market economy that got you into prison in the first place? So both of these are doing the same thing, but the purpose might be different, but the process is still similar. Also, keep in mind that most of us never have had conversations about intimate partner violence or sexual assault unless we've had the privilege to attend a university. We should be having conversations about intimate partner violence and the impacts of intimate partner violence on communities and families as early as elementary school with an age-appropriate conversation around these issues. There is no reason in the United States that the first time that someone hears about consent or intimate partner violence or the types of abuse is in a training such as this one or at a college level. Right? That's something that we really need to shift. So what are our educational institutions teaching? In many ways, some of our educational institutions are perpetuating a culture of sexual assault and intimate partner violence. As Ms. Andrea Brown stated, your silence will kill you. So not speaking about it is condoning, not speaking about it is supporting. And so we need to create curriculum and discussion in our educational institutions to be able to have these very radical, not radical, to be able to have these very basic conversations around intimate partner violence that should not be seen as radical. Medical and medicinal institutions such as hospitals and community health centers tend to either promote or denote or not support intimate partner violence. And it really depends on the medical institution. We have a history of medical experimentation in this country with Black, Indigenous people of color. We have great distrust around medical providers. And so for many folks who are victim survivors who go into hospitals, they might not be trusting of nurses or doctors who have already shown that they see them in stereotypical racist, sexist, homophobic, or transphobic ways. And so the provider, the doctor, the nurse, the SANS nurse who does the rape kit of the intimate partner violence survivor who just experienced the violence in his, her, or their home, they could literally be the life and death sentence between someone's results at that hospital. So this is why it's so imperative for our providers to have a critical understanding of the different types of intimate partner violence that people experience, such as the different types of abuse, but also to be culturally sensitive and culturally humble, not just culturally competent, but culturally humble to the different people who are coming through the door. Religion can be a huge support for folks who are experiencing intimate partner violence. As Lady T shared in her story, her faith was a big asset in terms of helping her to heal. But in many ways, we've also seen religion be a deterrent or sometimes a death sentence. You'll see in a video that I share, one of the victim survivors talks about some of the messaging that she received from her spiritual leaders. We still have some conservative spaces that will hear someone say, I'm being abused by my partner, and the parishioner's response or the pastor's response or the imam's response is, divorce is not of God, you should stay in the marriage, right? When we know that abuse certainly is not, right? So we have to change our conversation in religious context around intimate partner violence to really make a hard line that abuse is never okay, and whatever we need to do to keep a family safe is what we should be offering to parishioners. Economics and works go hand in hand because often in economic and work spaces, we do not see support for victim survivors. You cannot call in many work environments and say, I need to take 2 days off because I'm in the hospital as a result of my partner throwing me against a wall and burning my hair. It's very difficult to have those conversations with employers. In many ways, employment situations are not set up to support the growth, healing, or exit of a victim survivor who is experiencing intimate partner violence. Government is a big one too. Policies, we've seen cuts to things like VAWA, which have historically been the Violence Against Women Act, which have historically been the space that has uplifted policies and legislation around intimate partner violence. And more of these things are cut with like women's health, VAWA. Those policies are imperative. And when we don't have at a policy level that conversation happening for how it impacts communities, we see real issues. Social services is a huge one too, because we see this at House of Ruth, and I've seen this in a lot of work that I've done with advocates over the year, with victim survivors over the years. People will go to social services expecting help because they're trying to start over, right? They don't have any money. They need food stamps. They need temporary cash assistance. They need temporary disability assistance. They need disability income such as SSDI or SSI. They need Medicaid, Medicare, all the different social entitlements that they are literally entitled to. And yet they're often faced with great disdain from the institution, their local social service institution, right? There's a great, the sort of term that's used a lot in Black studies and within the work around people of color, this idea of crabs in a barrel. And so we see a lot of disdain from workers who are being underpaid severely, who are having to work a lot of hours, who feel, why should you get food stamps and I have to work 40 hours at a low wage job that I don't like? I'm not going to take the proper steps to get your paperwork through. And so a lot of times we see things, barriers to services, like folks not having an address, having to use someone else's address to get those services, folks not having social security numbers and being wrongly told that they need social security numbers to get the services, right? Folks not having paperwork in order. And so all of those deterrences, again, if these food stamps could be the difference between me staying in an abusive relationship and leaving, because I'll be able to at least feed my family as we go to the next step. We really need to also train social service workers, case managers, anyone who is working in those fields to be very sensitive to how to support victim survivors as they're coming through those doors. Yes, I agree, Mary. Pastors do need training. We offer, not to give another shameless plug, but if you want to speak to me about that, I could definitely help your church, your congregation set up a training for faith-based leaders. We do offer that at House of Ruth, and there'll be some really exciting things forthcoming around that, because that is a training that is definitely needed. Media is very important because we all ingest it in some way, right? Even if you don't have cable, you have streaming services. Even if you don't stream, you have social media. And even if you don't have social media, it still impacts your everyday life. But all of us usually have one or some of these apparatuses. And so particularly with young people with social media, we see where folks can either be supported in their healing journey, be applauded for being a victim survivor of intimate partner violence, or be dragged, as we say on social media. Why are you telling this story? No one wants to hear this, etc., and really feel disparaged and discouraged from actually sharing their truth. Now, police and courts go hand in hand, particularly when we're thinking about Black and Indigenous people of color communities. A lot of us do not feel safe with police. Take the last 250 years as an example. Screenshot that down or focus that in to the last 20 years. Focus that even further to the last 2 years. And the upheaval in this country that we've seen with folks across age and racial background protesting in the streets for the immense amount of police brutality on Black and brown bodies in this country. So if I have been told that the police are not meant to serve and protect as they are intended to, but in fact, if I get pulled over, that it might end up in me being shot or murdered, or even landing in jail for something I didn't do, my first call when I'm experiencing intimate partner violence may not be to the police, right? Because I already don't feel safe with them. Furthermore, if I know that my case is going to go to court, and I've grown up in a community where courts have generationally and systemically oppressed my community and folks that look like me, right, have not given me a fair shot within this justice system, have given me sentences that didn't match the crime, have incriminated me for crimes I didn't commit. This might give me some real generational trauma, right? And I might not feel safe in the courts. I have to say, just growing up in Baltimore City, I'm a Baltimore native as well. I'm a proud Baltimore native, Tubman City all day. And so growing up as a child of the 90s, there were so many people who were involved within drugs and the drug culture, and courts were a very regular part of their experiences. These were older people in my life. And so I have great aversion to courts. I avoid them at all costs. They cause me anxiety and trauma, and I am not alone in that experience. I also know that part of the reason why I'm so passionate about this work is because I believe that intimate partner violence and sexual assault can end in my lifetime. I believe that I will be out of a job and that I'll be able to just frolic and write and dance, right? And not have to talk about these issues, because I believe we can end it. And the way that we begin to end it is to really have these conversations and educate and change policy, all these things at one time. I also come to this work both as a researcher and an educator, and I come to this work myself as a victim survivor of intimate partner violence. So there's both professional relevance and personal resonance with this experience. And so I can talk from either perspective, right? Knowing that I would have to take my case to court, and knowing that as a Black woman, how intimidated I am by the court system, even as someone who has not had a criminal record. Imagine if you did. That was a huge deterrence in my own personal journey. And we hear this with many BIPOC victim survivors of intimate partner violence. So we need to make some structural changes, y'all, in order to support. Inside of the wheel, you see the interpersonal violence of intimate partner violence. In order to support healing and the ending of sexual assault and intimate partner violence, we have to make some structural changes. The fear police and courts systemic racism at its core, right? Bad and poor educational systems and medicinal institutions, structural violence at its core. And so these are things that we have to address in tandem and hold our elected officials that we put in position accountable so that we can stop seeing permissible examples and permissible incidents over and over again of intimate partner violence in our community. Now, I know that was a mouthful, but I hope that this was helpful to give you a general framework of the structural piece. And now we're going to move into talking about who it impacts. So I just want to note the information I'm about to give you is just the folks who report intimate partner violence. Remember this last slide that I just showed you, all of these reasons here are the multiple reasons why people might not. We talked about all the reasons they might not. Another group that is very adverse to police and courts are folks of the LGBTQIA plus community, right? Oftentimes we see victim survivors who are same sex or same gender loving couples, and police will come in and say, with a very heteronormative lens, I can't tell who's the man or the woman, quote unquote. So I'm going to arrest both of you. Now you're being abused by your partner, and now you find yourself in prison, right? Being misgendered, being dead named for trans individuals. These are all reasons why LGBTQIA plus, particularly Black, Indigenous, people of color folks who come from that community do not feel safe within police and courts. So thinking about that in this next slide, right, there are many people who do not report. So the numbers that I'm showing you are probably much higher because these are just the folks who we know who actually do report. So for example, we know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. We also know that there's a higher number of folks who do not survive their abuse and are actually murdered. For women, it is 1 in 3. This is extremely high. And again, these are of the cases that we know and that are reported. Also, IPV victims are everyone and can be everywhere and at any time. That is across socioeconomic levels, educational, racial, gender, sexual orientation, religion, ability status, and age groups. So when we think about cyclical violence, we do know when I share with you all that there is a gender disparity. While it can happen to anyone of any gender in terms of being abused, we also know that women are experiencing much higher rates of cyclical or repeat violence. And it is important to note that members of the LGBTQIA plus community or SGL, same gender loving, are experiencing higher volumes of intimate partner violence than their heteronormative counterparts. However, they are reporting at much lower levels because of the intrinsic homophobia and transphobia that is entrenched in our culture. So the transphobia and homophobia that one might experience from a hospital or from the police or from the courts might in fact keep you from reporting. I also want to note that we still have way more research to do with folks who are gender fluid or non-binary. And so we definitely need to promote more data on this group. So now we're going to talk about the different types of abuse that you might see come up in someone, because there are various types. And I want to open it up to the chat. You can go ahead and put this in the chat or in the Slido. Can y'all name some of the different types of abuse? And I'm going to check the chat here to see if anyone had posted anything. Oh, thank you, Nyla, for the compliment. Gaslighting is the type. Thank you, Mary. Nyla says emotional. Yep. Cold shoulder. Yeah, I like the way that was framed. Verbal. Absolutely. Financial. Carol says financial, emotional, physical, psychological. Beating my belly pregnant. Yes, abuse for folks at different levels of gestation. Gaslighting, verbal, emotional, financial. Absolutely, absolutely. Emotional is repeated because we see that getting bigger. Thank you all for chiming in. Mental ghosting. Yeah, these are all different types. So what I want to do, financial, yep, gaslighting, verbal. What I want to do is give you guys sort of the big six, which is physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, financial, and cultural or identity. And we've kind of talked a little bit about these, but I just want to give you some more in-depth definitions. So physical is perhaps the most, I would say the most obvious in terms of us being able to see uh, the effects or the impacts of the abuse on a person's body. So for example, if you work in an office and one of your colleagues came in and their skin was completely fine, they had no bruises, but then the next day they come to work and they are black and blue, they are bruised, right? They have a black eye, they have bruised lip. That would be an example of physical violence. It is intended to cause fear, pain, and injury and other physical suffering or bodily harm. I apologize for the background noise. Community Engagement Center, there's always a lot going on, and can cause severe injury and even death. Can include things like hitting walls, breaking objects, throwing objects at a partner, and it often co-occurs with other forms of abuse. Now, sexual abuse, which is a big one, as I said to you all, it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I want to talk a little bit about consent. So when sexual abuse, someone is being forced or manipulated into unwanted sexual activity without their consent. And consent is an enthusiastic yes before each intimate and sexual event. So consent before kissing, consent before oral sex, consent before any types of penetrative sex, right? If there is not enthusiastic consent, then it is a type of sexual abuse. There can be physical and non-physical components to sexual abuse. And we also see that reproductive coercion can happen in sexual abuse. So things like controlling a partner's reproductive rights, making sure that they can't make healthy decisions for themselves, sabotaging a partner's access to birth control, condoms, or general body autonomy. And to the left, I made sort of a map. The big one that we think about often is rape or sexual assault, which should not be happening, is a problem we need to address, more legislation, more advocacy, all of those things. There are other levels as well to sexual assault that are not rape or sexual assault. It can be sexual coercion. It can be things like using sexually degrading language or imagery. It can be things like revenge porn, when someone takes or distributes porn that was created or a videotaped sexual act for a couple and they break up for whatever reason or get divorced. The person then shares that information on social media or on free porn sites without the other person's consent. Those are examples of sexual abuse as well. So I don't want us to just think of rape and sexual assault, which again is a real issue and we must end, but there's a whole map, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but you can see them to your left. There's a whole map and context of various types of sexual abuse that take place. Consent is key. And if consent is not held for every sexual act, and there is, if a person cannot give consent if they are not conscious, a person cannot give consent if they are inebriated, either from alcohol or drugs. A person can only give consent when they are conscious, awake, and fully able to engage, right? This is also important to think about our brothers, sisters, and folks who are differently abled or disabled, someone who has cognitive disabilities. It has to be very clear of the language that is being used if it is things like ASL or other types of body language that are used if they cannot verbally say yes. This is something that needs to be discussed between partners, because otherwise we're getting into sexual assault. There's another group that often doesn't get talked about, are folks who are disabled and differently able when it comes to intimate partner violence, sexual assault. And we see very high numbers of folks who are disabled and differently able experiencing physical violence and intimate partner violence relationships and intimate partner relationships, sexual violence, and many others that I'm going to name. So when we think about emotional abuse, this is a huge one because it's very invisible, right? It's different from what we see as physical abuse, which is traumatic and painful and should not be happening. And yet emotional abuse is not always something that we can see. Victim survivors are terrorized and belittled through many things like humiliation, shaming, and name calling, unrelenting criticism and degradation of their personhood. This can be done in person or online. There's a lot of emotional abuse that happens online, especially with young folks. It can have long-term debilitating effects on a person's sense of self, integrity, and eventually diminish resiliency. And it also frequently occurs alongside physical or sexual abuse. In that same regard, we have psychological abuse, which is very problematic and really insidious. Also invisible, right? We don't see this necessarily on a person's body, but we can definitely sense it from their aura and their energy. When someone is using mind games to wear away at another person's sense of mental health and well-being, and it often causes the victim survivor to doubt their own sanity. So someone in the chat had mentioned gaslighting as one. It can include things like minimizing, denying, and blaming when it comes to victim blaming, when it comes to the abuse, but also gaslighting. Gaslighting is this concept that it comes from a play that was done where the main character in the play was a husband who was trying to make his wife think that she was quote unquote crazy. So he would do things like she would have a water bottle on the right side of the table. He would move it to the left side. She would come downstairs and say, "Why is my water bottle on the left side of the table? I had it on the right." And he would say, "No, it was always on the left," and keep doing that until she started to doubt her own sanity. So literally making someone feel as if the experiences they have are A, not valid, B, didn't happen, or C, didn't even exist, right? This is gaslighting. Think about when gas leaks in your home or your place of business. You don't see it, but the impacts that a gas leak has on you can leave you dead, can leave you harmed, right? Gaslighting does the same thing. And psychological abuse is really problematic. And I will say that we often don't see physical or sexual abuse without emotional or psychological abuse. These things all kind of go hand in hand. Yeah, it says they talked about revenge porn and consent the past few years in my kids' high school. I thought that was good. Thank you, Roxana. And I also see here, somebody was saying things like specific things that are being put inside of a woman's vagina as a type of abuse. Yeah, it can get very deep. Thinking about financial abuse, and this is a big one that I feel like doesn't get discussed enough because, again, as I stated, we live in a capitalist society, and within the society and culture that we live in, what we see is if an abusive partner has access and control over the money, they have access and control over that abused partner almost indefinitely, right? So controlling a victim's access to economic resources, their fiscal freedom and choices, isolating the victim survivor's financial present and future stability. It can also be things like employment abuse. We've seen examples of abusive partners going to the abused partner's place of employment and saying things like, "Did you know that he used to be a drug addict and he used to steal from us? He was arrested for drug use. And you really shouldn't have him at this job," right? Causing the person to lose their place of employment, therefore relying on the abusive partner, for their sense of livelihood. This is extremely problematic. Limiting or preventing access to existing personal funds. This is another way of financial abuse. It may be that the abused partner actually has some sort of income, is getting temporary cash assistance, has a business on the side, has a job, but they're giving all their money to the abusive partner. The abusive partner is then giving them a $40 allowance for the week, for example, out of their $1,000 check bi-weekly. And so they have no control over their finances and intentionally damaging the victim survivor's financial credit. Now, this is huge. When you think about credit in this culture, and I will make a point to make a connection, speaking of intersectionality, I asked this question of what has been one of the most divisive tools of systemic racism in this country, and my argument would definitely be credit. this arbitrary number that controls where you buy a house, if you get a house, if you get a cell phone, if you get a job, whether or not you're able to get transportation. All of those things are dictated by credit. And if you don't have all or one of them, you are not able to live a full life in the 21st century. So we've seen examples of abusive partners taking out credit cards in the abused partner's name, right? And then running those credit cards up, not paying the bill, and now the abused partner has a poor credit score. So when they are ready to leave and get that apartment or get that house, they have a terrible credit score and are unable to do so, right? So credit is huge, and this is a very deeply disturbing and effective from the point of power over another person method of controlling someone's ability to be able to have independence over themselves and their family. So thinking about cultural or identity abuse is very important because this one often goes under discussed or not discussed at all. This is when someone uses aspects of someone's particular identity as a means of control. This can include examples of things like limiting faith customs. What if in your faith tradition, there's a certain way that you're supposed to dress within that culture in order to have access to the faith spaces, right? For example, if someone is Muslim, traditionally conservative Muslim, and wears a hijab, and the abusive partner takes her hijab and burns them or hides them so that she doesn't have access to the hijab, now she can't go to mosque, she can't go into marketplaces, she can't go into banks because she is seen as breaking the cultural tradition of that religion and that faith. That is a huge type of abuse. Using racial slurs as a standard greeting, not calling someone by their name, but calling them a racial slur as if it's their first name or their nickname. Threatening to out someone who is from the LGBTQIA+ community against their will and without their consent. This is huge because while we have made extreme progress within civil rights and human rights as it relates to folks from the LGBTQIA+ community, from marriage equity and equality to rights that relate to professional rights, being able to teach in certain states, taking away certain sodomy laws, there's still much progress to go. And consequently, there are still many places in this very country where one cannot hold certain professions if you are a openly queer person, right? And so someone might say that I'm living my life as a queer person, but I'm not publicly out. And so the ramifications of that could be that I could lose my job in some states as a teacher or a priest or a pastor, right? I could lose it because of the morality clauses and the laws that are still very outdated, but are still present. I could be gay bashed, literally. I could be physically harmed if someone from my community finds out that I'm a queer person. And so there's real ramifications for outing someone without their consent. And it's definitely a type of cultural or identity abuse. Now, this is a huge one as well. We see this a lot at our Highlandtown location, which is we have a location here in Baltimore City in the Highlandtown neighborhood, which primarily serves the Latinx diaspora of folks and folks who speak Spanish as a first language. And often when people do not have full citizenship of the country that they are residing in for whatever reasons, we see abusive partners manipulating their immigration status. So saying things like, if you report me to House of Ruth, for example, I'll report you to ICE and get you deported back to the country that you were fleeing from in the first place. So this is a huge deterrence, not to mention many, particularly for women, for Black and brown women who are immigrants, coming to this country on what's considered the quote unquote marriage visa or the marriage transaction in terms of being able to get married to become a full citizen. If the abusive partner or the abusive husband is holding that over your head and all you want is to immigrate to America for better opportunities, and that's what you've been taught, and that's what your goal has been, you might endure and put up with that abuse. More importantly, if your abusive partner speaks the language of the country and you do not, they will use that as a tool to dictate to any service providers that it's not really abuse happening in the home, and you will have no form of recourse because you don't speak the language. So there's so many connected forms of cultural and identity abuse that really don't get discussed, but that we need to make space for. So with all of that, I know that was a lot of information. Thank you so much for sticking in there. We're getting through all this information here, and I'm seeing some thanks in the chat. Thank you, Janine, for that. I want to give some context as well for this concept of intersectionality. I personally despise the term microaggressions because I feel there is absolutely nothing micro or small about the type of aggression that systemic racism plays in the life of Black, Indigenous people of color. We need to call a thing a thing. And so there's nothing small about systemic racism and how it impacts us on a daily basis. But this term microaggression is a buzzword, and I want us to sort of understand intersectionality if we're thinking about serving, helping, protecting, working with, giving services to BIPOC victim survivors. Intersectionality is a term that was coined by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, and it acknowledges that there's an inextricable link between various forms of oppression and that you can't adequately access axes of power without examining the interconnected forms of oppression. That means that if I am a Black, as I am many, I don't mind sharing my different identities, right? If I'm a Black woman, queer, disabled, differently abled, right? And I have all of these identities, I can't just say, oh, I'm just Black, or oh, I'm just queer, or oh, I'm just a woman. It's all those things happening at one time. And all of those things happening at one time will either dictate if I do have access or seat at the table in various spaces of power, right? When it comes to my profession, when it comes to my pay, right? When it comes to different spaces that I can access in terms of social spaces, all of the parts of myself are always at work structurally, culturally, communally, interpersonally, and individually. Also, intersectionality places power and agency back into the hands of those who have been adversely impacted by power or who have been oppressed. So when we think about BIPOC victim survivors who are experiencing intimate partner violence, this is the takeaway that I want you to have. You don't have to be an expert on intersectionality. Take a class with me if you want to learn more about that, or do some more research, right? Come to some more trainings that we might do if you're interested in that topic. But what you do need to know is that it is critical to acknowledge that while a Black or an Indigenous person of color is experiencing intimate partner violence, they are still experiencing the daily impacts of any numbers of structural violence on their daily life. That means they're still experiencing racism. They're still experiencing sexism, homophobia, transphobia, classism, sizeism, right? All those things are still happening. And this is why we have to be very, very gentle with BIPOC survivors who are experiencing interpersonal violence and structural violence all at the same time. Intersectionality can be a useful tool in this understanding. Furthermore, when we think about the impact of abuse, I included this picture for one of my favorite Black artists here. It's called the I Am Enough wheel, and there's some affirmations here. We have to think of the impact of abuse that I've talked about with the different types, that they can cause complex trauma to victim survivors. When we are supporting victim survivors, we have to keep reminding them that they're on a healing journey and supporting that healing journey, and acknowledge how much strength and resiliency it takes to simply acknowledge the trauma and work through it. Most importantly, we must let them know that they are enough and that we are enough. So let's get into some of the reasons why folks stay. Why do you think people stay in abusive relationships as we begin to wrap up here? And I'm checking the chat. I'm so glad, Carol. I'm glad you're learning so much. And Mary says shame. Some people stay because of money. I see on the Slido screen. Yep. Anything else we want to add? Fear. There are many different reasons. You guys are hitting on some of them. The person
I can't add shame.
Yeah, shame. The person they fell in love with is now the person they have to leave. Absolutely. I always give the example, right? If any of us have, most of us on this call, I'm sure have gone on a date at least one point in our life. And if you went on a first date, you're looking beautiful, hair is done, cut, nails, outfit, all that good stuff, smelling good, and you're having a great date, you're sitting down to dinner. And as you're beginning to go for the dessert, the person that you're on the date with reaches across the table and punches you in the face. Will there be a second date? Absolutely not, right? There will not be a second date. The restaurant is going to rally around you. You're going to choose to call the police or not, press charges, but you are not seeing this person again. However, this is not always how abuse works. Oftentimes, we don't see the abusive behavior until months or years into the relationship. And so it's very hard to detach from the person that you originally fell in love with, who was princess or prince or person charming, and now they've turned into this very much a monster in your life, right? Finances, fear, housing, children, shame. Yeah. Not wanting to admit a wrong choice. The emotional connection is harder to leave. Absolutely. So in the time that I have left with you all, I want to show you a little piece of a video called #Why I Stayed. And this is from a viral movement of a victim survivor who literally got tired of people asking her, why didn't you leave? And so she just started posting up reasons why she stayed and using the #Why I Stayed, and it went viral. So you're going to see in this clip, you're going to hear, I'm not going to show the whole video, but I'm going to show you some sections of victim survivors who are sharing why they stayed. And I want to share this with you because it helps to personalize so that we can have deeper empathy and understanding of where people are in regards to intimate partner violence.
It is the question that I'm asked the most. Why did I stay? Why does any woman stay? And for the life of me, I can't understand why people are obsessed with it, because to me, it's so obvious. Why does anybody stay with somebody that they love? We've all been in relationships that, even if they weren't abusive, we're not working any longer. And we all stay far longer than we want. And you stay for the same reasons. You stay because you love the person, or you love what you used to have, or you're trying to take care of your children.
When we ask, why did you stay? We're blaming the victim for their abuse, as opposed to asking, why did you hit this person? Or why are you violent? Or why do you feel the need to be violent?
Why would somebody abuse? Why would somebody beat the people who love him or her most on earth? Until we ask that question, we won't be able to obliterate domestic violence. We have got to focus on the perpetrators of violence, not the victims.
It's cliche, but he really was Prince Charming. He was very kind and sweet and nice. I left what I was doing to come and be with him, and I was alone with him. I didn't have any friends or family in the area. I couldn't find a job, so he paid the bills. And so we got into an argument, and that's the first time that he hit me. He actually threw me up against the wall and started to choke me. And I didn't really understand what was happening because he was not that person all this time. And so when he finally let me go, I thought it was something I did. I wasn't thinking to run. After we got married, it didn't stop. It just got worse and worse and worse. And I felt like I was trapped. At that point, we had moved from where we were across the country again, and I was further isolated. I didn't have any friends or family. And essentially, he still was the breadwinner. I was dependent on him. So if I left, what was I going to do? Where was I going to go? How was I going to take care of myself? I felt like no one would understand, and I felt like no one would care.
Met in the beginning, drastic change is because taken by him. One of the reasons why we stay is because the behavior is such a drastic change from the person we met in the beginning. And we're constantly looking for the man in the beginning instead of concentrating on the man that is in front of us. Once I understood that, then I made the decision, you know, I gotta go. This is not the same man I married. I mean, I love him, but he's gonna kill me.
With every violent moment, I felt further connected to him in this kind of twisted way. I felt that, you know, we had this secret that bound us together and that this was something big and we were working on it. And so we had to stay together until we worked it out. The violence got to a point where I realized that I could die. I had to create a plan. I had to figure out where I was going to go and how I was going to get there and who I was going to reach out to for help if there was any. I was scared. I was afraid that he would find me. I was afraid that he would be so angry that I left, that he would come after me. I couldn't just get up and walk away.
And it was the most terrible feeling to know that I could leave and I still couldn't leave because I was bound by this psychological trap that I thought was love, that wasn't love. You know, I had so much denial. If you had come to me and said, are you being physically abused? You know, if my doctor had asked me or a best friend, I would have said, no, I'm not being physically abused.
You do feel isolated and you keep a lot of secrets. You know, you keep a lot of secrets in your heart, in your home, in your head. I stayed because I believed him when he said he wasn't going to do it again. I stayed because I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have any money. I didn't have access to any resources. I stayed because my religious community convinced me that I couldn't get divorced because God would hate me. I stayed because I loved him. You know, I stayed because he was the love of my life, and I wanted to believe that love could conquer all, including abuse.
All right. So of course we want to leave on an empowering note and see why I left, hashtag why I left. I chose to live, but this gives us a better understanding. Sort of a lot of the themes that you heard come up in Lady T's share as well. There's many different reasons, from religious influences to personal fear. Even there was a story, if you want to watch the whole video, you can find it on YouTube, hashtag why I stayed, of a woman who said she literally was afraid to leave because he said that he would kill her and her family. And so there's multiple ways that we can engage with this information, but most importantly is to make space for victim survivors and their families to begin to heal and provide a safety planning environment for them to actually exit the relationship. So this, okay. Don't know what's happening. For some reason, our slides are coming up blank. Give me 1 second, you all. I apologize. It's like it's a technical issue here. Yeah, and Andrea was saying that these women are amazingly beautiful. I agree. Just gonna go back into see if we can see the screen here. I don't know what took place. We were fine for a minute there. Thank you for bearing with me for 1 second here. Just gonna restart us over again. And so as I'm pulling this up, I'm gonna just begin to wind down here in the last couple of minutes that we have. And what I wanted to share with you all, here we go. I think it's back up here. Okay. Like I said, sometimes technology doesn't want to agree with us. What we see here is that there are a variety of reasons why people stay. And so One of the things that I wanted to provide as a closing for us is how can we actually support victim survivors, regardless of if they choose to leave or stay, because we know that there's multiple reasons why that might be taking place. All right. So let's see. Screen one.
Professor, while you're pulling that up, I just wanted to let everyone know I put in the chat hashtag why I stayed the video link.
Oh,
I think
thank
it's
you.
the 7 minute. It's
Yes.
7 minutes. Okay, so I put that in the chat. And then if you could please, guys, give feedback about this great presentation.
Yes.
I put the Survey Monkey up, and then I'll let you finish, Professor. I just wanted to use that time for that.
Closing thoughts, sorry for the technical delay here, but more than 50% of folks will leave for good, and leaving is the most dangerous time. Victims are 70 times more likely to be killed in the 2 weeks after leaving than at any other time during a relationship. And so we have to provide safety planning for folks. We do offer safety planning training. I'm more than happy to talk to folks about that. And when we think about reinvention, we must provide non-judgmental support to make sure that victim survivors actually survive and have the opportunity to reinvent themselves after abuse. So if you hear, why don't victims just leave, rephrase that to, why do abusers choose to abuse? Because abuse is never the victim's fault. How we support victim survivors, I'm going to skip this slide out for us, but how we support victim survivors, think about it like a web. Remember that you don't have to have all the answers. You should always provide non-judgmental support and active listening. Remember, abuse is never the person's fault. Support self-empowerment, give them support after the relationship ends. A lot of people only support when the relationship is happening, but starting over is a very difficult time. Remember, you are not the savior. They know best what they need, right? And you're here to encourage that empowerment, and refer them to professional and peers and certified peer support like House of Ruth. Here are some harmful messages. I'm not going to read all of them, but when you hear, we talked about language being important and can be a tool of liberation or oppression. When you hear things like, what did you do to provoke them? Change it to, I'm sorry, this is happening to you, and you just need to leave. How about, I want you to be safe. How can I help? Here's a map of Maryland and all of the domestic violence programs in Maryland by county, including House of Ruth. I've also included the National Domestic Violence Hotline, as well as the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence website and phone number. Additionally, here are some specific resources for Black communities: the National Black Justice Coalition, UGMA, which is the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community, the Black Women's Health Imperative, and Trans People of Color Coalition. And I would be happy to share this with Roxana if the slide deck to share with anyone who's interested in these slides. I know it's a lot of information. House of Ruth is always here. We're one of the nation's oldest and most comprehensive DV or domestic violence, intimate partner violence centers. We offer a 24-hour hotline, emergency shelter and transitional housing, client service coordination, free counseling, free legal assistance, the Training Institute, which brings you these wonderful trainings. We even have an abuse intervention program for the abuser to get to the core of why they abuse, because we do believe intimate partner violence impacts the whole family. And as I share with you, our House of Ruth, Maryland, Howlandtown location, we are all inclusive, open to everyone from every background. We offer programs in English and in Spanish, and we're open to everyone of the LGBTQIA+ community and any and everyone. So some quick takeaways: intimate partner violence impacts everyone. We can encourage personal, familial, communal, and structural changes to the culture of violence that perpetuates and encourages intimate partner violence, provide non-judgmental support rather than victim survivors ready to leave, and all victim survivors are resilient and deserve the chance to be able to recover and reinvent after abuse. Remember that no one deserves to be abused. And I know we've had a lot of questions throughout. Thank you, y'all, for putting those in the chat. I don't know if we have any time for any extra. I have also included an evaluation QR code, and I believe Roxana has put this in the chat as well. But if you could take a few minutes to let me know how I did and how this training was for you, I would greatly appreciate it, as well as completing what Roxana has posted as well. And here's my information at House of Ruth. Feel free to email me at any time, contact me via phone or text. And I've also listed House of Ruth's website. Please do stay in touch. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much. That was a great first round. So this is totally free from the House of Ruth. You can connect with Professor Covert to make sure that everyone has that first step, because really this is like a mental health first aid for intimate partner violence, which means you don't have to fix that person or anything like that, but just connect them to resources, which is House of Ruth. The other slide that we had shared, and I was trying to look for my connect with a therapist slide, but really it's not doing any harm and making sure that we give like a warm handoff. So when you call Black Mental Health Alliance, you'll either talk to myself or Cheryl Maxwell. If you email Professor Covert, she's the one who responds back. And I think that's like a easier handoff that you could tell someone that, look, I've seen these people in action. They'll be able to assist you, and they'll take care of you. So don't feel like you have to fix the situation, but we'll be able to make sure they get to that right person. And just like when Cheryl is following up, Ms. Maxwell is following up with people to connect with a therapist. She is a licensed therapist, and she makes sure that there's still those therapy, the people that she's referring is still taking clients. Some people do the work pro bono, so she has access to that. So don't feel pressured like you have to be the one to solve that that situation for that person. And like we were saying, they know what support and help they need. So I don't know if Andrea wanted to come on. I was telling her, we were talking offline, like, oh my goodness, we weren't expecting all this. Even though I knew what the topic was, it's like I still didn't know. I didn't expect for it to be I don't know. It touched me. I know it touched me. Okay, I see Andrea. I'm gonna let her go ahead.
So first of all, Roxana, thank you so much. I think I said earlier, and thank you, Professor and Lady T, and for the wealth of information, the transparency, and even for us to be able to change, for me, how to change what I say and how I say it, right? And so I want to thank you for that. And Roxana, I know I said early on that when you go through the calendar, we talk about, what should we talk about? And so this could not have been more perfect in this moment. I just totally, so everybody knows, I have not asked her yet, but there will be another part. I'd like to talk about, I'd like to have some conversation. Professor, I want you to come back and give us some more of your wisdom. I'd even like to talk about, Lady T talked about how she fell in love with her beloved on the college campus. And I really would like to figure out what our language should be for young people in this space. And so be on the lookout. We're gonna put something together, and all of that kind of good stuff. But I am what I rarely am, and that is sort of speechless between my own anger, right? And my own thoughts around how I could have handled things differently when talking to people, right? And so just such a powerful piece. I appreciate this, being on this part of this journey. So thank you so much. Please, Roxana will probably come back and remind you to fill out, complete the survey. It is important because we want your voices heard. We want to bring you what we know that will make impact in our communities. And again, if you want the resources, Roxana can make sure that you get those. And you heard Professor, shameless plug, you can get her anytime you want, but stay tuned for part 2.
And I'm going to put my email in the chat, so that way, if you need to reach out to us, you can do that at Black Mental Health Alliance. And I'll also send up a follow-up email. So with the follow-up email, a lot of times it's our newsletter, and you can click the link to see the video over again. So I just want to point that out to you as well. Ms. Lady T, do you have anything you want to close us out with?
No, I just really want to just, thanks for creating safe space for me to share my story. I really appreciate everyone who participated. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And I just want to say, if I could just say really quickly, please know, I think it has been reiterated, and I thank you, Andrea, for your transparency and what you just shared. It is not anyone's responsibility on this call, if this is your first time hearing about this information, to think that you have to have all the solutions. That is what we are here for. And I know that I gave you a ton of information. This conversation could literally be a 3-hour conversation if we had time to go further into discussing and things of that nature. But we are here. We are here to support. We're here to guide. We're here to train. And so it's important to do that. And most importantly, remember that when people are experiencing intimate partner violence, their power is taken away. So whatever you can do to help restore their humanity and make them feel as empowered as they actually are. Because remember, they are powerful. We are powerful, but that power has just been stripped for a moment. And so whatever environment you can provide to do that, if it's just a listening ear and some tea, some literal hot tea while you listen, right? And then being like, hey, I know someone over at House of Ruth, can I give you their information? That is more than enough. Empowerment is key. And I just wanted to sort of bring that home. Don't feel overwhelmed. We are here, we're here 24/7, we never close. And we really want to make that key, that victim survivors have voice, have always had voice, and should always have voice.
Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate you guys supporting the Mind Health Shop Talks. We're going on 3 years, so thank you guys. Have a great night.
Good
Love
night,
y'all.
everyone.